There are few things as universally loved as apples. Apples are a fall favorite, whether you like to eat them raw, baked in a pie, or turned into cider. And there's nothing like going apple picking to get into the autumn spirit. Why do humans have such a soft spot for apples? Maybe it's because they're one of the few fruits that can be used in so many different ways. Apples are versatile fruit that can be used in either sweet or savory meals. Or maybe because they're good for you, or maybe because you can find them all year round. Apples are eaten in many ways, each one satisfying. And then there are over 7,500 different types of apples. That's a lot of apples to choose from. Apples are one of those fruits that may really be considered a universally appealing option, regardless of the reason for one's intake of them. But being a universal favorite means there's a lot of demand for them, and it needs to be farmed as much. Luckily, China has it covered. A whopping 40 million tons of apples are produced annually in China, making the country the global leader in apple production. That accounts to over half of the total supply in the world. Apples have been grown in China for centuries, and the country is home to many varieties of the fruit. The nation has a climate that makes it a prime location for apple orchards, and farmers there tend to choose apples over other produce. To top it off, the country has spent substantially on R&D to increase the quality of its apple crop. Perhaps that's why apples from Yantai and Wendeng in the city of Weihai, in the province of Shandong, Jingjing County in the province of Gansu, and Jiqian County in the province of Shanxi have been given the geographical indication classification. This comes as the quality of Chinese agricultural products continues to be recognized around the world. So, how has China come so far from individual backyard farming to being the world's biggest supplier? We know that apple farming has been around in China for over 2,000 years, but the country's obsession with apples started in the 1980s, when the Chinese government began promoting the fruit as a healthy alternative to cigarettes. Today, China is home to more than 2,500 apple orchards, contributing an estimated $13 billion to the country's economy, and Shandong region has been standing out the most. Apples thrive in Shandong's environment, making the region an ideal location for orchards. The summers are hot and sunny, and the winters are cold enough to allow the trees to go into dormancy. This dormancy period is crucial for the trees to produce fruit the following year. This is why Shandong province is home to China's largest apple plantation. Area-wise, the Chinese farm is larger than 2,000 football fields, spanning over 4,000 acres. It annually yields up to 9.5 million pounds of apples. Roughly 2/3 of China's apple crop comes from the province of Shandong. So, how do they do it? And what is their secret? It all starts with preparing the soil. In the first few years of apple orchard development, green manuring crops like beans and sunflower are grown to improve the soil's texture and nutritional content. Once the soil is nourished and ready for the next crop, which in this case is apples, the seeds are planted. Apple seeds need to be exposed to cool, moist conditions before they're ready to sprout and grow. So they're sown outside, half an inch deep in the autumn, and the natural seasonal cycle takes care of the cooling requisites of the seed. But if the conditions are not ideal, they place the seeds in moistened sand in a plastic container and keep the container in the fridge for 3 to 4 months. Then, once the danger of frost is gone, they're sown half an inch deep in the ground. Once the seedling emerges, the next step is keeping it well watered and protected from pests. That's why apples need pest control. Apples are susceptible to a wide range of diseases and fruit pests, making it very difficult to farm this fruit without the use of some kind of pesticide. Apples are much harder to grow organically because of fungal diseases and pests that don't even exist in the West. If you want to cultivate apples without using pesticides, you'll have to put in a lot of research and labor. After the plant has reached maturity and starts blooming, the next step is thinning, which is basically removing plants or parts of the plants to facilitate the growth of other plants. If you do not thin your flower seedlings, the grown plants will suffer because they'll be too close together and be in dire competition for sunlight, air circulation, and soil nutrients. In apple trees, heavy bearing not only leads to the production of undersized fruits of low quality, but also triggers the cycle of alternate bearing. When done at the right time during fruit development, thinning can help control crop size and improve the size and quality of the fruit. Since thinning by hand is hard and expensive, chemical thinning is used instead. In apple farming, the use of chemical thinners is common when the weather is very hot and dry, since these conditions have a negative impact on absorption. The spraying has to be done extensively so that the whole canopy is covered. There's a correlation between calcium insufficiency and chemical thinning, so after thinning, the farms reinforce the trees with calcium to restore health. For the farm, the desired ratio of fruit to leaves is 1 fruit for every 40 leaves. This leaves roughly 15 to 20 centimeters of space between each fruit, and there will be only 1 fruit on each spur. When that is sorted out, the next step is pollination. And for this, apple trees need company, or friends, we should say. Apples can't bear fruit without the help of another apple tree's pollen. That's the case with most of these varieties. This is called cross-pollination. This second tree must be a different cultivar, but also one that will flower at the same time. That's where bees come in. The bees are very important because bad pollination can reduce the number of fruits and make them look odd. That's why, for effective pollination, many orchards hire or keep beehives. Because of this, they try not to use too many broad-spectrum insecticides, which can lower the number of bees. When the apple blossom opens up for the season in early spring, it marks the beginning of a fresh apple crop. After roughly 6 weeks of flowering and bee pollination, the fruit is ready to harvest. China's apple harvest typically starts in late September or early October and continues through November. During this time, workers climb into the trees and hand-pick the apples. In most cases, apples are picked before they're fully mature, because leaving it on the tree for too long would lead to a softer fruit and a shorter storage life. Once apples are picked from trees, they're processed in many ways. One option is to sort it according to size and quality before being packaged up and shipped off to supermarkets all over China and, indeed, all over the world. Another option is to make apple cider. Apple cider is made by pressing and crushing apples to get their juice. After pressing, the apple juice goes through pasteurization process before being bottled. But these are done by their own respective brands. Fun fact, it can take up to 8 years for a single apple tree on a farm to produce enough fruit to harvest and produce a single apple. That's because an apple tree starts bearing fruit from the 8th year. But after that, the productivity keeps rising and extending until the 17th year, and then remains stable for as long as 30 years. And depending on conditions, an apple tree can live for up to 40 years, which means the next apple from the same tree would be relatively very soon. For hundreds of years, China has been a global leader in apple production. In recent times, the nation has been able to harvest close to 18 to 20 million metric tons of apples annually on average. They've been meeting more than 60% of worldwide demand for apples. And everyone who likes apples will hope it keeps getting better to keep up with demand. After all, it is the most versatile fruit.